Good afternoon and welcome to the April 17th, 2024 City Council Work Session. Thank you for joining us in this virtual meeting format. For work sessions like this one where there is no opportunity for public comment, those wishing to access the meeting can do so by watching the live stream available on the website, the broadcast on Comcast Channel 21, or by calling into one of the phone numbers listed for this meeting on the public webcast and meeting materials webpage. And thank you again for joining us. And with that, I call this April 17th, 2024 work session to order, and I will turn it over to the city manager to introduce the first topic.
Thank you, Mayor. Our first topic is to go over our transportation SDC project list, system development charge project list. And I'm joined today by our transportation planning manager, Rob Interfeld, who's going to walk us through the presentation.
Mayor and members of the City Council, good afternoon. I'm just going to tee my presentation up here. If you can bear with me for a moment. Okay, can you see that?
Looks good.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, well, we are here today to provide a brief overview of the Transportation SDC project plan, give you an update on progress made in implementing the plan, and discuss the potential to add some new projects to the plan that have emerged as priorities since plan adoption and that are important for ensuring that our transportation system continues to support growth and development in Eugene. Systems development charges paid by developers provide a means of funding capital improvements that provide capacity in infrastructure systems needed to serve growth, including transportation. We have these fees to account for the extra demand put on our transportation system by new development, as well as to ensure that we can serve this growth. We have an SDC project plan that guides how we spend SDCs. This is the first time that we are proposing to make changes to this plan, so we wanted to review how the system works and why. Envision Eugene is our community's vision for growth and development, part of which is implemented by the Transportation System Plan, known as the TSP. Transportation SDCs are one key element of funding the projects on the TSP project list. The TSP was adopted by the City Council and Lane County Board of Commissioners in 2017, and the Transportation SDC methodology and Transportation SDC project plan were adopted by City Council in 2018. The SDC project plan was populated by all the projects in the TSP that are eligible to receive SDCs. However, there is not a requirement that projects be in the TSP in order to be in an SDC project plan. There are 205 projects in the Transportation SDC project plan that have a total of a little over $113 million in SDC eligibility. Examples of the types of transportation projects included in the plan, in projects funded in part by Transportation SDCs include urban standards upgrades, traffic signal improvements, protected bike lanes, and shared use paths. Previous to 2018, Transportation SDCs were not based on a specific project list, but state law required that when we update the SDC methodology, which we also did in 2018, and that methodology sets SDC rates for development, the state law required that the city also develop an SDC project plan that includes a list of projects. This plan may be modified by the city at any time, and this is our first time coming to you since the project plan was adopted to discuss potential changes. So since the Transportation SDC project plan was adopted in 2018, approximately $6.6 million in Transportation SDCs has been expended on constructing projects in the plan, and over 15 projects in the plan have been completed. An additional amount of around $6.5 million in SDCs has been programmed for 7 transportation projects that are in the CIP. Next, I'm going to talk about the projects that we are proposing to add to the SDC project plan, and you can find these in your packet as attachment A. So there are 3 groups of projects that I'd like to show you, starting with the Clear Lake area. The Clear Lake Urban Growth Boundary Expansion Area was adopted by City Council in 2017. And as part of that process, the TSP was amended to include 3 projects. Urban standards upgrades on Clear Lake Road is one project, and then there are 2 separate extensions of Terry Street. One from the current terminus of Terry north to Clear Lake Road, and the second from Clear Lake Road up to Airport Road. And it is important to add these projects to the SDC project plan so that the city can support development in this area by either constructing new streets or improvement projects ourselves, or facilitating developer-driven projects that are provided SDC credits. The next project is the Beltline Local Arterial Bridge. This is a partnership with ODOT in Lane County that would add a new bridge north of Beltline that would connect the Green Acres Road to Division and really connect those 2 neighborhoods without people having to get on Beltline. The bridge is in the TSP, but was not in the 2018 SDC project plan because the project was still in development. And the project is further along now with a completed facility plan and NEPA process. And we are requesting that it be added to the SDC project plan so that the city can contribute match to the project. It will likely, the bridge project will likely cost well over $100 million. And staff is only requesting that $5 million of eligibility be put in the SDC project plan. That's a small part of the overall funding, but it could be impactful in terms of partnering with other agencies on grant applications. And then lastly, we're proposing, there's 2 path projects that are proposed to be added to the SDC project plan. They're both side paths, one on Howard Avenue and one on North Delta Road. And you can see on the map the locations of the projects. And these projects have emerged since TSP adoption. They're both in areas that have experienced significant new residential development, and these projects will help connect those areas to the rest of our network for people walking and biking. There's been significant community interest and support expressed for these projects through the Move Huge process, the River Road Santa Clara neighborhood plan process, and through direct communications with neighborhood associations. These projects are in alignment with our Vision Zero and Safe Routes to School plans and are on streets that people don't feel comfortable walking or biking along. The city has received grants to build these projects, and the SDCs would serve as match to the grant and supplement the grant funding in order to get the projects built. This is what the 2 streets look like right now. Howard Avenue, you can see, just has very narrow shoulders on it that are not really very safe or comfortable for walking or biking along. Delta Road has a 5-foot wide sidewalk and bike lanes, but it has pretty high-speed traffic, and a lot of trucks, gravel trucks in particular, use it. And we've heard from people that they don't feel comfortable biking on that street. So that is the end of my presentation, and I'll open it up for council discussion. And basically, if City Council is supportive of these changes, staff will prepare a resolution for council action as a consent calendar item at a future council meeting.
Thank you very much for that. Very succinct and clear, I think. Are there any questions or comments from councilors about any of these projects? Yeah, Mike, go for it.
Thank you, Mayor. Rob, thanks so much for the presentation. I'm entirely in favor, especially the bridge that you mentioned in the North Delta to the River Road corridor. That's going to give people who live in North Eugene a real opportunity to bike and bus back and forth between Green Acres and North Gillum area and the River Road area without having to get on Beltline, and give us a local option that's be a lot safer for people who are using alternative modes. So I really look forward to that getting done, and I appreciate you including that as well.
Hey, thank you, Randy, and then Emily.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Rob, for the presentation. I support anything that promotes pedestrian bicycle safety of all kinds, especially like it when we can separate vehicles and pedestrians from traffic with physical barriers. At the same time, I don't know what my colleagues are hearing. I'm starting to hear more and more feedback from our community about frustration that road tax dollars are being diverted, which we made that decision going into it, being diverted towards pedestrian and bike when our roads are still needing repair. And I just wanted to share that piece. Again, I support this project, and I think we do need to be improving safety, but I also don't want to be tone deaf to the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Emily?
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Very clear and succinct, which I like. I think these are great projects. I think it's okay to put money into bikes and peds. We said we were going to. And I appreciate the areas that have been chosen. So I think it's a great idea. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I see, oh, Counselor, yay, Jennifer.
Yeah, thank you. Also very supportive. Thank you so much for the presentation. Really appreciate it. Love the maps that help me visualize, and I think the community too. So anytime we get those in, I think that's great. I want to agree with Randy that I have been hearing from some folks the same thing, but I also hear the opposite from people who are bikers and who walk a lot, and pedestrians. I think it's just the population that you talk to, that they're folks who bike and walk a lot, appreciative that they're seeing someone, they're seeing their city acknowledge that their safety is important too. So I think it really depends on who you're talking to. And a lot of this, I think, is when I'm talking to folks who spend a lot of time in their cars, is just that moment of education that, like, yeah, I'm acknowledging that our streets are not where we want them to be. And we know we need to work on that. And we're making a lot of progress, but we're not there yet. But also explaining, like, the very real safety issues that folks who walk and bike or take a wheelchair or other, mobility device that are navigating our streets, what they're dealing with. And that often really helps people put it in perspective, I found. So yeah, it's a balance. And I'm thank you for Randy for bringing it up, because it is a real thing out there that we're hearing, and we need to acknowledge all sides, I think.
Anybody else for first round before I turn it back to Mike? I just wanted to say one quick thing about this, which we just last week had the report on the pavement report and the condition of our roads. And so sometimes the perception is one part of the road is not in good shape, but the overall report was very promising that, over 60% of the roads are in good shape or very good shape. So the taxpayer funds have been well spent to improve the quality of the roads. So, and a lot of these road improvements, they're road improvements that come alongside with the bike and ped infrastructure as well. So they're not really two separate things, they're combined. Okay, Mike.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted also to say in connection with what Randy said, and I agree, by the way, that the bridge north of Beltline, I think, will be a tremendous enhancement to capacity because of the local connector portion there. You're going to have less of a rush hour problem on Beltline going north and going west in that area. And I think it'll be a real boon for people to not get stuck in traffic jams on their way going from one area to another. So that part I'm really happy about. But my question is for Rob, because these are SDC funds and the purpose of SDC funds are to enhance the capacity and as new population joins us, they're paying to be able to enhance the capacity that they're going to put a demand on of already existing facilities. Do we have any sort of, for the future, do we have any sort of statutory requirement to show capacity enhancement with use of SDC funds or SDC projects?
Councilor Clark, Mayor Venice, I will say that the whole SDC project plan was constructed to serve capacity. So that's the way, and it's really a network and system approach. And we look at all modes, well, primarily walking, biking, and driving, and we don't look at transit as part of our SDC plan, but it's really multimodal and a network approach. Does that answer your question?
Not really. So the only answer to enhancing the capacity of our roadway is alternative means?
Oh, I see. You're not. Well, I see what you're asking. We have projects to enhance the capacity of the roadway in the SDC project plan. I can't rattle off a list right now necessarily, but I think the Beltline example that we're talking about today is a good
Sure,
one,
yeah.
good example of
I
that
agree.
for sure.
And that's what I was agreeing with. I'm just wondering for future reference, do we have a statutory obligation to show capacity enhancement?
I don't believe that we do. It would be a question of what does state law require when you construct a TSP. I think Jennifer Willer, a city engineer, is here. She might be able to help answer the question. But the city, one of the things we have is our mobility standard, and that's like that's the amount of delay that we accept on our transportation system. So when you think of capacity, one way of thinking about it is like how well does traffic flow? And our mobility standard, which is we call our level of service standard, that's one way we have of gauging that. And that's partially baked into the modeling that developed the TSP and the project list that we developed to support that. Jennifer, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I would. And I also see that Emily Jerome has something to add too on this. But I would say that the state laws do require us to determine what the growth capacity is and to figure that into how many dollars each project is eligible for. So there's a calculation kind of behind the scenes and as part of the methodology that determines what portion of the project is related to growth, and that's how much it's eligible for SDCs.
Got it. I understand that. You're saying that it's baked into the formula for methodology, and that eligibility has a determination about, hey, how much capacity increase are we going to need here?
Yep.
Okay.
Emily, do you want to chime in?
Just a bit. I mean, basically, Councillor Clark, that when we add it to the list, so if you all are moving forward with this, the plan itself will show the amount of the project, the cost of the project, and how much of that is eligible, how much of that is capacity increasing. This will not affect, the methodology will remain the same. This will not increase or change anybody's SDCs. When you go back into the methodology, when enough of these projects are done, and when you believe it's time to update our methodology, a whole new list will include that information for every single project. We're never proactively required to show it except by the line item on the list.
Okay. Does the city's own internal rating of the facility A, B, C, D, E, does that play into it as well?
It could, but it's not exactly. I don't think that is part of how we do the math or do the monetary allocations for SDCs.
Okay. Thank you very much. Very helpful, guys.
And Councilor Clark, I think I misunderstood your question a little bit, that I was thinking more about vehicular capacity, and that's just like that's another dimension of our TSP. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you so much. So this is information only. We're not being asked to take any action right now, but I think something will come back for the consent calendar. So with that, I think we're ready to move on to our second item today. And so I will turn it back over to the city manager.
Thank you. Our second item today is the Chapter 5 parking requirements. It's a revisit after our public hearing to see how you might want to modify or adopt that. And I'm joined by, I think Jeff Petrie is going to walk us through this.
I am. Let me, of course, I grabbed the wrong camera here. Let me get so you can see me. There we go. Okay. Thank you, Sarah. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm Jeff Petrie. I'm the Curbside and Admin Services Director. The Parking Services Program and the Public Space teams are programs within my area, so I will present. And I will share my screen now. All right, good. Thumbs up. You can see it? Yep. Okay, great. Today, we're continuing our discussion of the proposed Chapter 5 code amendments that originated with a council poll last fall. for persistent violators, chronic behavior problems, and open air drug use. We split that poll into 2 work sessions on November 8th, 2023, with one focusing on persistent violators and chronic behavior problems that I presented on, and it was followed by a work session by Chief Skinner on open air drug use and Measure 110. At the November 8th work session, staff presented information on repeat parking violators with a proposed ordinance to amend Chapter 5 Traffic Code. Council voted to move the proposed ordinance to a public hearing. As the council's proposed ordinance moved to a public hearing, staff added 2 more proposed code amendments that would support the Parking Enterprise Fund for consideration at the February 20th public hearing. After the public hearing, the ordinance was scheduled for possible action by council on March 11th. However, council directed the city manager to schedule this work session to further discuss the proposed ordinances. For today's presentation, we listened to the public comment and read feedback for the proposed amendments. And I'd like to spend a little time today just untangling the code amendments that was in the proposed ordinance. So as stated earlier, because we are opening up Chapter 5 for possible code amendments, we added 2 other proposed Chapter 5 code amendments that would support the Parking Enterprise Fund. The Parking Enterprise Fund is a dedicated fund in the City of Eugene's financial system where we account for what we call the business of parking. It is similar to other enterprise funds such as the airport and wastewater funds. All the expenses related to parking, all the capital needs related to parking projects, and all the revenue from municipal parking program are booked in this fund, like a separate checking account to City of Eugene. The fund includes management of parking permits, enforcing parking meters and time limits and other sign regulations, and parking adjudication. The fund supports equitable access to our curbs and parking around the city, which then supports livability and healthy functions of the community, and also furthers our climate goals around motorized vehicles and our transportation plans. The 2 proposed code amendments that were added to the ordinance is to support our management of our municipal parking system, as our operations are bumping up against the meter and fine maximums that were last adjusted in the 1980s. As our community has grown and changed over the last 40 years, so has management of the citywide parking system to support our transportation plan and parking reforms that align with our climate-friendly and equitable communities, a climate recovery ordinance, and our financial management policies. In the ordinance, we had added a proposal to remove the maximum charge of $2 per hour for our on-street meters. The meters in our campus area have been at this maximum since 2019, and parking demand is still very high and would support an additional rate increase through an administrative order process. The second proposed amendments would increase maximum fines outlined in code, as well as add a new maximum fine to address parking violations in bike lanes and at bus stops. We have invested significantly in our transportation infrastructure, and modernizing our fine schedule would support those investments. Because this is the first time in decades, and staff went back and, went through the brain trust, we don't remember the last time we modified the code for current staff. I wanted to spend a little time talking about how parking fines are set and parking maximums and presumptive fines in municipal court. So the Eugene City Code sets the maximum fines that are allowed. These are administrative fines. They are not criminal violations. The presiding judge of the Eugene Municipal Court sets what's called a presumptive fine schedule, which is always less than the maximum fine. A presumptive fine is a fine that can be reduced by the court, even to $0, if a parking citation is appealed or goes through a validity hearing or goes through parking court. In other words, council sets the maximum fine allowed in code. A judge sets a presumptive fine, which then can be reduced down through the court's adjudication process. The last time the city fully updated its presumptive fine schedule was in 2010. At that time, Judge Allen was our presiding judge and a contract employee for the city. Since that time, we've hired Judge Gill as our presiding judge, and the position is a full-time employee of the City of Eugene. Last fall, we did do one adjustment to meter and time limit violations in our presumptive fine schedule, which increased the fine from $16 to $25. And that $16 had been set for 14 years. But the remaining fine schedule was not adjusted because we are bumping up against the maximums in our code. So to better manage parking in our community, Staff proposed an across-the-board presumptive fine increase to Judge Gill. However, the current code maximums don't allow the presumptive fine schedule to modernize to meet our current needs. And the current presumptive fine levels that were deterrent 15 years ago-ish are not as much of a deterrent today. Because the proposed ordinance attached to the EIS cites certain code sections, but doesn't really tell you what those parking fines are, I will map through various parking violations that we're proposing to increase the maximum fine in code. And I will summarize them as we move along here. So one of the proposed maximums is a new request, and that is to address parking violations and bike lanes and bus stops. Currently, it's a $40 violation or a $50 violation, but we have invested significantly in our transportation infrastructure, and we are proposing to increase this fine to $250 per incident per vehicle parked there. And I'd like to just walk through, this is a snippet from our parking presumptive fine schedule. It shows on the left side a violation. The next column is the authority, so EC 5.225 Eugene Code. The maximum fine for this violation is $50 and the current presumptive fine is $25. Apologize, I misspoke earlier. We have a special agreement in the Fairmont neighborhood for an event parking agreement that was created in 2010 that during 22 men's home basketball games, all parking fines double during that time of the events. So a few hours that event parking is happening. The presumptive fine is $50 because 25 times 2 is 50. Staff are proposing that the LTD bus stop across the city would be a $250 presumptive fine, which then in the Fairmont neighborhood would double to $500. And if you do the other policy that we have that is common in all municipal courts is that parking fines double after a certain amount of days. For Eugene, our parking fines have always doubled if they're unpaid or unadjudicated or unappealed after 30 days. So what that would mean is that an LTD stop anywhere in the city where a presumptive fine was issued for $250 and the registrar owner of the vehicle did not appeal it or come to court to talk about it, that would double after 30 days to $500. However, our maximum fine is set at $50, so we are not able to make any adjustments to parking in an LTD bus stop. So what we are proposing is a maximum fine specific to this violation, as well as parking a bike lane and removing a boot from a vehicle and mobilization, is that the maximum fine for these violations go to $1,000. The second area that we propose increased maximum is increase the code from $25 to $200 for fines related to fines issued off-street, parking garages and lots. And then city-operated shuttle bus fares. I think at some point in the city, we operated a shuttle, and some people may not have paid, and we may have issued a citation for that, but we don't have a city-operated shuttle, and it's not applicable here. And so I'm going to move on past this one to another example. The rest of the parking code either increases the maximum fine from $50 to $300 or $100 to $500 for other parking violations, including exceeding the meter and posted time limits. So the 2-hour zones around campus or downtown meters and campus meters. Here will be another example I'll walk through. The violation for a time limit is set in authority Eugene Code 5.265. The maximum fine level is $50. The current presumptive fine is $25 if no action is taken. After 30 days, that $25 doubles to $50. So that meets, we're allowed to double that under our current code. However, in the Fairmont neighborhood, where this is the primary fine that we issue to mitigate parking in the neighborhood during the 22 events, is that it's still set at our old $16 level. 16 times 2 is 32, and that fine is not able to double per our internal policies. It can only go up to $50 under the current rule. So staff has proposed that we would like to Judge Gill a presumptive fine of $50 for the event parking district. However, that fine cannot double after 30 days. And so this is an example where we've requested the maximum in code increase to $300. And there's numerous of these examples, probably 75 different parking violations that are through there, and I just focused on a couple for today's presentation. And the second part of the original ordinance that council reviewed on November 8th as related to repeat parking violations. And within the repeat parking violations, staff proposed 4 code amendments to Chapter 5 Parking Code. One of them was in 2021, council amended the code to define a block as both sides of the street and require a vehicle that's parked in that block to move more than 2 blocks away before returning. What we've experienced through our municipal court adjudication process is that parking appeals are upheld because it's not clear if the vehicle moved 2 blocks away after returning to park on the same block. This amendment will reduce the repeat citations on the same block face and clarify the code and reduce staff time. The area of biggest impact that we would experience this is in the 1 and 2 hour parking zones that are located around downtown and campus. So you get a park for once on the block face for 2 hours, and you have to move more than 2 blocks away, and you can't return until the next day. Also in 2021, council amended code to add recreation vehicles to prohibit parking from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. so overnight on the block of a residence, a motel, apartment, house, hotel, or other places of sleeping accommodation. This fine is currently a $25 violation. And the current process is that our parking officers or neighborhood officers receive a request from a complaint about a violation. Staff respond to the vehicle, see if the vehicle is present. They chalk the tires. They issue a warning citation in the afternoon. They return the next morning. If the chalk mark is still visible, the staff will issue a $25 citation. We have not found this fine to be an effective deterrent to this violation of code. This proposed code change will enable the officer to impound the vehicle for a 4th or subsequent violation within a 90-day period. This amendment would provide a stronger incentive for the small number of vehicles that are rotating between 2 or 3 neighborhood parking locations to park in a different area. We have seen with the possibility of penalty of impoundment, it significantly affects the compliance of the vehicle driver for both this parking code and storage on the street. When vehicles are marked and worn, the overwhelming majority move in compliance with the rules and avoid an impound. And of course, impounding is not our goal. It's changing the parking behavior and seeking compliance with our code at the curb. The third proposed amendment at our November work session was mailboxes. This potential amendment would prohibit a vehicle from blocking a mailbox and authorize a citation and or impoundment, similar to blocking a driveway. This is a frequent service request from across our community, and I've been in this position for 18 years, and I've heard it for 18 years that currently if a vehicle is blocking a mailbox, the code does not prohibit that action, and the Postal Service may or may not deliver the mail and will leave a note on the vehicle to move or your mail will not be delivered. The fourth option in our ordinance proposal is to mirror the vehicle discharge violation as found in Chapter 4 into Chapter 5. So a parking officer or a neighborhood service officer could enforce the vehicle discharge to Blackwater. This amendment would enable the officers, the parking and neighborhood officers, to respond and remediate situations more effectively and not have to request our time-limited police resources. This violation has been one of the most alarming to members of the community because the obvious implications for public sanitations, but also our stormwater runoff and the safety of people and pets. Moving this violation or mirroring this violation to Chapter 5 is also an administrative fine. It is not a criminal citation as it currently stands in Chapter 4. So in summary, we have staff added 2 proposed code amendments to the ordinance that happened in February that would support the parking fund recovery for the Parking Enterprise Fund, the business of parking. And then we also have brought forward to continue discussion the proposed amendments that we discussed back in November. And I will stop there and open it up for any questions and or discussion.
Okay, thank you very much. The hands started going up almost as soon as you started your presentation. So I have Mike and then Lindsay.
Thank you, Mayor. Jeff, I wouldn't want your job, brother. I got to tell you, I really would not. I think with CFAC coming in the next couple of years, parking on street is going to become, an even more difficult challenge than it is today. And it's already a problem right now. I think on-street parking is going to produce conflicts in our community. So more power to you, brother. I appreciate the suggestions very much. I've read the note that Lindsay sent with regard to proposals for changes here, and I want to focus my questions around solutions to the problem. And I understand there are a lot of folks who use camping on the streets as an alternative to a difficult reality in their life. But we have to stop people from camping on the streets. That's not an acceptable alternative. RVs camped in people's neighborhoods and in business districts around town have become a considerable problem, and as you know, the source of quite a lot of complaints. So I know that the enhanced and increased fines and enforcement options are hard for some people to accept. But do you, Jeff, have any other options other than enhancing enforcement to stop the behavior and fix the problem?
Councilor Clark, great question. We do have Peter on our call here that we're exploring options. I know that we do lead with questions and more trauma-based interactions with our neighborhood officers to provide options, explore options. And I know the city has invested a lot in other options. I think I would probably pass that to Peter or another conversation around those pieces.
Well, let me say also, I'd love to hear from Peter, but I would also say that at least, there's my picture up there. Sorry about that, guys. From my point of view, I would want any changes that I would vote for to be clear about their effect on fixing the actual problem, which is stopping people from camping on the streets. So is Peter gonna add to here?
There he is. Peter, I'm opening it up for you.
Thank you, Mayor, Councilor Clark. The reality is in our community, we have 3,500 people who are unhoused, and those folks are either going to be so we need places for those folks. And it's the places, I think you've heard me say before, those places are houses, shelters, streets, right-of-ways, hospitals, jails, etc. And so, we, Homeless Services, in partnership with folks that are working through the county, do our best to connect with folks who are in public spaces and route them towards sanctioned, sheltered places that meet their needs. The reality is we don't have enough of those. And so while the Homeless Services team, the Public Space team, and Lane County's social service teams collaborate and coordinate to address the issue that we're talking about this afternoon, we don't have great answers.
And I guess I would say that a lot of this conversation ends up sounding like the city has a responsibility to find people places to sleep. And I don't agree that the city has that responsibility. Is it a good idea for us to do that? Yeah, we should do that work and help people where we can. But I don't believe it's our job to make sure everybody has a place to sleep. That's not the city government's job. And for us to set rules about how we live together and that you can't sleep on the streets in an RV, I think is a completely reasonable one and one that we need to uphold. So I know we're going to have a more thorough discussion. I just wanted to say my part. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Lindsay and then Emily.
Thank you. I want to thank everyone here for this work session. I know I kind of made some changes to the process that was a little bit out of the ordinary, so I appreciate all of you. So today, obviously, we have the opportunity to vote on this ordinance as a whole. I think it's clear that my vote would be no today. So my intent with this work session would be to actually split this into two pieces, the business of parking pieces and then the persistent violators pieces. So I want to explain the motions that I sent out last night. I know that they were a little bit complicated. So the first motion would actually delete sections to do with the persistent violators out of the parking code because that wouldn't trigger an additional public hearing for this piece. And that way we could actually vote today on those business pieces. And then the second motion would be to bring back the conversation of persistent violators. Like Councilor Clark said, we need to find solutions. I don't agree that this is the best solution, and I have significant issues with each of these pieces, but we need to have a broader conversation about how we're approaching vehicular camping. And I do have an idea about a programmatic or process idea that I've been working on. It's not fully fledged by any means, but I hope that we could start to work towards more solutions that I believe would be effective at addressing the issue, because it is a big issue. And it's not enough for me just to vote no today on this code. Our city and our neighborhoods deserve us putting more attention and more time and creating effective action to improve the situation, both in the short term and the long term. And I see these code pieces more as that short-term fix that could actually have a detrimental impact over the long term on our city. And so I also need an assurance that these code pieces are not going to negatively impact people that we don't want them to impact. My worry is that because you know, a mom with a baby in a minivan can't figure out how our code works, that they could potentially have their vehicle impounded at a higher rate. So I need codified protections for situations like that. And so I don't have enough time, I think, in this round to go over my idea on that process, but I think I can do that in a next round. And I'm really looking forward to hearing from other counselors and having this discussion. And I, again, appreciate everyone here.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I will give you another round. Emily and then Randy.
I have lots of things to say. I might need 2 rounds. Lindsay, I think we need a motion to divide. I'm always in favor of moving to divide, so you might want to do that. About the parking part, the $2 maximum, are we going to, is it just endless? So we could, you know, charge you $500,000 an hour, or is there going to be a max? Personally, $2 an hour is a lot. The increase of the fines to $500, that could ruin some people. I mean, I guess if you can afford to go to a basketball game, you can afford $500 to park in the wrong place. But if you are living at the edge and you don't have $500 and you're, you know, stopping doing all the things you can to get the $500 and you don't make the limit, now you've got $1,000 fine. That could make people homeless. So I think we need to be very careful about that. The camping from 10 to 6, that's not what bothers me. I'm asleep then. You know, I'm not looking at my window to see that you're blocking my view. If you're gone by 6 and you don't leave garbage, I hardly knew that you were there. My problem is in the daytime with all this bad behavior, and it's the bad behavior, not the parking. And some of those things we have rules, you know, noise ordinance, no sex trafficking, no drug sales. It seems that our problem on all of these is enforcement, because if we can't enforce the rules we already have, then why have the rules? Does it help? Do we have any data that some of us asked for before? What percentage of citations are paid? What percentage are paid when they double? Is it actually helping anything? I'm not saying we don't have a problem. We've got a really big problem, but how are we going to enforce? That's going to take quite a bit of money. And of course, how do we give people a choice? We don't seem to be able to have a big parking lot without making it very expensive, like the one on Garfield. And yet, if you can't sleep on the street from 10 to 6, where are you supposed to go? You know, it's going to push the problem from one place to another. It's where they stay longer that gets to be a problem. Can we reduce the 72 hours before we can enforce something? The 24-hour in residential areas where you have to move can have a very big impact of residents who cannot park there. I've got more to say. I need a second round. If there's any answers to that, I appreciate them.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, Jeff, I didn't know did you have any responses you wanted to give to anything that?
Maybe I can just share a few pieces of information. You know, one of the great things about Judge Gill in the court is the adjudication process. And I've been there. I have seen people talk to the judges. These are presumptive fines that the court set. And so they are all, you know, presumed. And they have the ability to talk to a judge and the court staff about lowering it or, you know, whatever the outcomes are. The other part, you know, when I was asked to bring questions about repeat parking violators, nearly all of our citations that we issue are around downtown and campus. We're talking the 2-hour zones, we're talking the meter violations, and the proposals I brought forward to council are across the board for repeat parking violators. So it is it's for everyone, and most of our citations are issued, nearly all of them are issued downtown to campus, which has been true for decades.
All right, that's helpful. Thank you. Randy and then Jennifer.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Jeff, for the presentation, and thank you to you and your staff for the yeoman's work you've been doing in West Eugene. It is better, but there's still problems, and it's mostly with repeat chronic offenders. In fact, just this morning, I at a coffee meeting, this issue came up like it does for me every day. People are frustrated with the current situations. They're frustrated that they have no choice. We talk about choice, but they have no choice. Our residents, our workers, our businesses, they have no choice in how public space is being utilized in front of their place of residence or workplace. In fact, on the way home from my coffee meeting, I snapped a couple of pictures that I shared with all of you earlier through email of a 40-foot RV with an accompanying Suburban and utility trailer tying up between 60 and 70 linear feet of public street and curb space. It was completely blocking the business it was in front of. And how do we deal with this? You know, Jeff, as you've shared with me, the vast majority of our unhoused population and vehicles have found a way to make this work, and they aren't popping up every day on the radar. But we have a relatively small group that obviously are not going to modify their behaviors, because we've been watching a lot of the same ones for over 3 years now, at least I have been, that keep coming up, and without any kind of repercussions, the behavior isn't going to change. And this isn't about targeting people. And as far as a mother and a baby in a minivan, I've been out on the street constantly for over 3 years, plus my experience as a firefighter. I've never seen that. I'm not saying there aren't mothers out there, and I have run into a couple of families, but most of them are single males that we have in our unhoused population, at least in West Eugene. That's what I see. That's what I run into continually, and that's what I hear about from constituents. So, I mean, I want to find solutions too, but we have talked about this ad nauseum. And the bottom line is, I would rather enact some actions now that we can come back and revisit later and modify, rather than do nothing and have this problem perpetuate and continue having people not feel safe and not having access to the street in front of their residence or business. And I'm sure I'll have more to say, but I want to hear the rest of the discussion from my colleagues. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Jennifer and then Matt.
Thank you. So first, I want to thank staff for the work you've done here, and just any criticism of things that have come up is not a criticism of you. We asked for something and you brought it, and I very much appreciate the work that you did. So I want to make that sure that was clear. So just so I'm clear, I want to make sure. So the fines, the judges have a lot of discretion. That's right. That even if we raise these maximums, they can take each individual case as an individual case and lower the fines as they see fit. Is that right, Jeff?
Yes, and Judge Gill is on the call, and I do see this on a regular basis, so I can confirm that. Go ahead.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a lot of faith in our judges and in Judge Gill, and he's come before us, and I really appreciate his philosophy and how he thinks about cases. And so I'm comfortable having that discretion that we can make some modifications and people are going to be okay, and he's going to do things that are appropriate. He and his staff are going to do things that are appropriate. So I don't have a huge problem with that, that group of changes. As much as I do with the things that are for repeat parking violators. You know, living in a vehicle is not a good solution. I think we can all agree on that much of it. But if your choice is living in a tent or living in nothing and living in a vehicle, the amount of safety that a vehicle gives you is incredibly powerful for someone who doesn't have a home. And there are quite a few women who are homeless. It's not all men. And just that being able to have something that locks at night so that you can actually sleep, and then oftentimes go to work, because many of these people do have jobs. They just don't have a place to live. Like, that's night and day difference in your life. So anything that is going to take away that tiny bit of security that folks have been able to create for themselves, I'm very hesitant. So increasing our ability to impound vehicles seems like it's going backwards for our long-term solution that we're trying to get to, where we don't have 3,000 plus people living on our streets. So I would be in favor of Lindsay's idea of having another discussion so we can dig into this a little bit more, about like really getting to what we want, because I think we all want the same thing ultimately, and just figuring out a way that we can really make lasting changes rather than like this Band-Aid fix that might get people off this one street, but they're going to go somewhere else, and they're in an even worse situation. So I just can't support these quite yet. What else? Yeah, so I guess in my last seconds, Lindsay, I'm in favor of that option where we have a chance to have an additional conversation.
Okay, thank you. Matt and then Alan.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Rob. Thank you, colleagues, for the conversation. I'm going to share my observations, and then I've got a couple questions. I do find it a bit unsettling that council, and not this council, but previous councils, have not adjusted a great many of the fees since the 80s. It reminds me of my community college service days, in which the options were to adjust tuition nominally every year, or no tuition increase, and then suddenly there's a huge spike in tuition increases. And this huge spike going from a $50 to a $500, doubling after a month for certain violations, gives me great pause about the 48% of people who grapple with fines who cannot pay their monthly bills, according to my research. Research also shows that, well, I'll pause there and double down on my concern that such a spike in fines potentially becomes a debt trap, and an incremental burden for the economically disadvantaged. That being said, further research indicates, and this comes from a LinkedIn article I found on graduated parking fees and recidivism, that the majority of persistent violators, those who have upwards of 8, 9, 10 or more parking tickets, are actually the most affluent members of the community. That's intriguing. My question is, how much is a fine for parking in front of a fire hydrant? And if I get that answer, I'll share with you why I'm drilling in on that piece in particular. I'm asking largely because of the social harm associated with illegal parking in front of a fire hydrant, and then seeking some parity and seeing how that stacks and weighs with the proposed increases for other spaces around the Fairmont neighborhood, or mailboxes, etc.
Is this for the Jeopardy clock? Text for me. It's either $25 is my gut, because that's what most would call maybe bad parking behavior, inconsiderate parking behavior. Maybe that's one other word. I want to say it's $25 currently, but it might be at 50.
Or a broken window with a fire hose.
It looks like most of our inconsiderate parking options are at $25. If we can just go with that for the moment, I will keep.
Right. So that piece alone gives me pause in that something that could so significantly impact public safety remains at $25. And we're suggesting spikes of other parking violations ramping from $50 to $500. Do we have a lever to pull and to adjust parking in front of a fire hydrant?
So it's current staff are confirming that's $25. We are proposing that fine goes to $50 through the presumptive fine process with Judge Gill, which then would double to $100 if it goes unpaid or unadjudicated through the courts.
All right, that's okay. So I'm seeking some semblance of parity there, and maybe it exists, and I don't see it.
Matt,
Mayor, I'm gonna need a second round, please.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to offer you. Okay, perfect. So, Alan, you're up next.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to first thank staff and Jeff in particular for all the hard work on this stuff. We've been dealing with it for quite a long time, and staff work's been excellent and very clear. So thank you for all of that. Good job, Jeff. I don't have a problem with updating the fine increases. Having lived through this when we were doing the arena parking district, just because we say something doesn't mean it happens. It's really up to the judge. We could say the maximum fine is $5,000, and the judge can say, yeah, it's only going to be 50, because there's equity and judicial restraint and all sorts of other issues involved in that. I also want to say I agree with everything that Mike said, and that we are searching for solutions on the second part, which is the repeat violators. But the solution cannot be punishing people by taking away their home and making them homeless. That just makes it worse. And last time we had this conversation, I shared data that was put together by some folks, and it was our own data. And it clearly shows that fines and impoundments don't work. They almost all go unpaid, like 90% plus. So we need to find another way that actually works. Just doing this knee-jerk, sorry, I shouldn't have said that. Just doing this, making really high fines or impounding vehicles is not going to solve the problem. So it's just pushing it down the block. So I agree with Lindsay by moving the first part and getting that under our belts and moving forward with that, and then doing the hard work that we need to do in order to find a solution that actually works on the repeat violators. So I support what Lindsay's trying to do here. And so thank you, Lindsay.
Okay, thank you. So second rounds, I have Emily, then Lindsay, then Matt. Take it away, Emily.
Thank you. I'd really like to hear from Judge Gill about how she thinks fines are effective. Would he give somebody a $500 fine? And again, what % of fines are actually paid? It doesn't sound like it's really helping a lot. My second question is, it's not the camping, the placement of the vehicles, it's the behavior of the people in the vehicles. And that we don't have enforcement. So if you don't see somebody selling drugs, the police they can't do anything about it. And then I think the biggest problem with all this camping, because it's most visible, is the immense amount of garbage. And I don't know, can people that can't afford a fine, can we impose a road crew or picking up the litter in other places. I think anybody could afford that, and it might be actually effective to give your time to pick up disgusting pieces of stuff. So could Judge Gill address some of that for me, please?
Thank you, Councilor Semple. There's kind of a lot in the question, and I appreciate all points there. Just a couple of big things. Would the court ever impose a $500 fine? I mean, I can't answer that. I mean, I think there's always a hypothetical situation where it would be warranted. But in this court so far, something that drastic has been very far and few between. In fact, some of the discussions about the presumptive fines versus the maximum fines, the question has been, do we need anything to be as high as 500? So historically, that's just not something that's come out of the court. I mean, the vast majority of any of the fines that come out of the court are going to be the presumptive fines as mitigated by the court after hearing from any particular registered owner or someone who has an interest in the vehicle. In terms of percentage of fines that are actually paid, I don't have that number. I think that our data folks could get that number. And so I think it would be a good number to have for the number of fines that are issued versus the number that are actually paid. The court does have access, I think really good access for folks who have received citations. We have the ability for folks to appear virtually. And so we've had folks appear from their vehicles on our virtual docket. We have the ability for folks to walk in any day of the week that the court's open to have a walk-in service at 8:30 so the court can hear what they have to say. And then we have parking trials, right? And those are some of the things that Jeff Petrie was referring to earlier. And so if there's actually a contest about whether there was a violation or not, then the court's going to hear that. And then, of course, the actual write-in ability. So folks can write in and tell the court what the circumstances are and to consider that in terms of what the actual ultimate fine will be. And from my experience here, starting under Judge Allen and continuing through today, I think the judges are extraordinarily reasonable in hearing a lot of things. And there's a certain point where it becomes clear, it doesn't always, but it becomes clear when you have that person who, let's say, is affluent, like Councilor Keating pointed out earlier. As an example, we had a gal from the U of O, and this was probably, I don't know, maybe just pre-pandemic, but she had over 500, or not 500, over 50 sites that were unpaid. And they were in the same parking lot next to the U of O, and she just said, look, I can't park anywhere else. I've got to go to class. And so instead of addressing the parking or getting a permit or doing something else, she just let it continue. That's a much different case than someone who's unhoused, living in their vehicle, who had just not made the 2-hour parking limit during the day somewhere else. And so it's going to be adjudicated depending on the situation if it comes in front of the court. So data-wise, we can get some of those numbers. I'd like to specify exactly what data we're looking at. But if the fines, the maximum fines are increased by council, the presumptive fines being set by the court, being set by me, both parking and the court understand that any increase in the presumptives that I give is going to be a very deliberate process. It's going to reflect actual numbers and actual needs as opposed to addressing other problems or trying to make sure that pain is felt in one area versus another. Nothing's going to move in terms of a presumptive fine without being very well thought out and understanding exactly what the variables and the issues are in the community. And that's, I think anybody that's appeared in court understands that's generally how we approach things.
Thank you. I really do want to know the percentage of fines that are paid. And when I was going over minutes from previous meetings about this, it was asked by at least 2 counselors at least a couple months ago. Do you think that increased fines will help? Do you think it will make any difference in the response we're getting? And if yes or no, do you have any other ideas, since you are dealing with these people much more than any of us and possibly more than parking or EPD? We're desperate to do something. Do you have any?
I understand that. I absolutely understand that. And I think that's an extraordinarily fair question. And I don't think I can answer that, which is me not trying to get out of answering the question. I see a very limited number of folks in the courthouse and hear from a very limited number of folks. And to be able to draw conclusions about the citywide, what may help, what may hurt, what's a good idea, what's not a good idea. That's not my bailiwick. I don't see that. I hear from people, and we have programs like our community court and mental health court and our opportunity docket to address a lot of the needs that are in the community. But whether a specific fine or set of fines helps curb behavior in a particular way, or whether it would help curb behavior, I can't answer that, and I wish I could. I think it's a great question.
Thank you for that, and your ability to adjust to the situation. The other big question, besides fines and punishments, is how are we going to enforce this? We don't have enough police. We don't have enough parking. We have huge problems with this. And to ask the police and parking to, more enforcement, they're doing as much as they can. So will a bigger fine make a difference? Will we enforce more? I'd love some information, not necessarily from you, but what do the police and parking think about this idea? Do they think it will help?
From the court's perspective, from my perspective, and I'll just give my small piece there. The enforcement piece comes in a couple different ways for parking fines as it is right now. Anything that goes unpaid over a certain amount of time is referred to a collection agency, and that's true for any fine, I think probably anywhere. The actual enforcement of that is through the same as other places, which is a garnishment process either by the Department of Revenue or a private collection agency. And so from the financial side of that's really the enforcement piece there. But parking does have
great, but I want to know about the interactions between the police and the parking people and the perpetrators.
Understood. Well,
I can't get them into your court unless I can get somebody to give them the ticket. And if we do not have that capability, then this is moot. I don't know if anyone else on staff could answer that. Thank you.
I appreciate that. I'm going to kick that over to Jeff Petrie.
I'm actually going to jump in on that, if you don't mind, because I think, when we take this one work session isolated in this issue, it's hard to peel apart how we got here. And how we got here has been years of trying to make improvements across town in different ways. And the council has asked us, what tools do you need? What tools do you need? And so we're bringing you what is our best recommendation of the tools we need to continue to make it a better situation. So when you drill into will this ticket and this enforcement make a difference? It does when you consider the full suite of all the other things you've done, including adding funding and support for neighborhood service officers and some of the other things. So it's all part of a big kind of woven basket of really just strategies to try to make it better.
Thank you.
Okay, Lindsay and then Matt.
Thank you. And I appreciate the conversation around equity around our parking fees. And it's really good to hear that this process has kind of that flexibility. Something that came up recently was that for people who are living in income qualifying housing, they might actually be spending more on parking than they do on their rent. And that equity piece there feels pretty glaring, but I feel pretty comfortable about moving forward with those pieces. I wanted to talk about kind of the idea I had, and of course, this is not a fully formed idea, but I recall a time, my very first encounter with law enforcement was when I got a fix-it ticket on my 90 Buick Skylark because the muffler was falling off. I was able to fix that issue and report that to my local law enforcement, and then I didn't have an impact on my record, and the issue was taken care of. And so with that kind of process, can we implement something similar with our vehicular camping code? Can we approach people at first with an order to fix or repair the issue at hand? And that could be your registration is out of date and you need to register your vehicle or get tags. It could be, your black water tank is leaking and we need to get that fixed immediately. There's a number of issues that a fix-it ticket with maybe a voucher or referral to a program that could help. And if that's not done in a certain amount of time, then our citations kick in. I think, you know, I come to this council as a peer support worker, and someone entrenched in the behavioral health field for many years. And I see what works in my field, which is compassionate care. And I also know that because I held this contract for many years, that our enforcement teams and our jail staff have been trained in collaborative problem solving, which is the core tenet that people do well if they can. And a lot of these people, they can't. They're not doing well because they can't, because of the trauma or the mental health challenges or the substance use, you know, self-medication for many years. And a lot of that comes from childhood traumas, right? So can we meet people where they are and help to create opportunity for change? Because like Emily said, you know, it's not necessarily the problem isn't really that they're parked here. We're looking at this in a parking ordinance, but it's the behaviors around it. It's the, you know, it is the repair type of pieces, the garbage that is impactful for our neighbors. And so can we address that more creatively and create a process that could be helpful long-term for our city? I'm sorry, I ran out of time.
That's okay. I've got you for a third round because I know you'll be coming back. Matt and then Alan.
Thanks, Mayor. You know, I'm keenly interested. First of all, I want to thank Judge Gill. Judge, your clarity and your thoughtful approach are greatly appreciated. Thank you for joining the conversation today and for all you do. I am keenly interested in particular in the oversized RV trailers that are referred to often by constituents, by community, by staff, by colleagues as the 40 repeat violators or chronic offenders. And it's my understanding that currently it's punishable by a fine to park an RV in front of or across from a house, a hotel, or an apartment complex between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. What is that current fine?
Councilor Keating, that was, we discussed earlier, it's a $25 citation. So our parking officers and neighborhood officers receive a complaint from the community. If that's the part, we go out, we'll chalk the tires in the afternoon, we'll issue a warning citation that you potential violation. It would come back out the next morning if the vehicle is still parked there. We issue a $25 violation, a presumptive fine. And I was just looking at some data. I think, you know, in the last 12 months, we've issued 80 warnings for that violation, and we've issued 14 citations. Of those 14 citations, about 3 vehicles account for almost all the citations.
So is the current program, in your estimation, working?
We, you know, we'll answer it this way, that, you know, by creating turnover at the curb, it minimizes debris accumulation, it minimizes the impact on neighborhoods and the complaints. What we have seen is there's a rotation that happens. I think I showed an example in November of, you know, there's a small number of vehicles, probably one handful, that are rotating around specific locations. Right. So it's, I don't have the data whether the fines are being paid or not. I know some RVs, they view it as a parking permit for the neighborhood for storing their oversized vehicle in front of their house. The proposal we brought forward is that it was a tool that we felt that having the ability to tow after, if you have 4 or more within 90 days, that would, the small number of vehicles would move to a different location or seek other options than parking in the current places.
So in our packet today, there was a piece that I'm just seeking a little more clarification about around those larger vehicles. And it says, this proposed chapter 5 code amendment would provide stronger incentives regards to larger size vehicles to not park overnight in places of sleeping accommodation again, I can't read that's cut off. But my question is, if we adopt Councilor Leach's motion, would we have the ability to come back and be more specific about weight or size, or more specifically address the RV camping pieces, pointing to the RV campers that park by Tugman Park, pointing to the ones that park right by South Eugene High, in my ward in particular? Can we, if we passed the administrative piece today, would the RVs be in that administrative piece, or would we have the ability to come back if Councilor Leach's motion is passed? And I see Catherine has her hand up, so this might be a Catherine question.
Yeah,
It's
Yes.
it's a
Go
little
ahead.
bit, I'm sorry, I'll just say real quick, it's a little bit challenging to speak of the motion. She put out a couple options. And so let me just answer that based on the motion as drafted that would amend the current ordinance. So right now, we don't have a motion on the table to adopt the ordinance. So we also don't have a motion to amend it. But let's say that there's a motion on the table to adopt an ordinance. The motion to amend would eliminate most of the sections of the ordinance, and then her next motion would bring those sections back. The only thing, if her motion as a whole passed as a motion to amend, the only thing that you would be acting on today would be to increase the meter rates in section 3 of the ordinance. And then in section 4 of the ordinance, you'd be acting on adopting the changes of all but that subsection 6. So everything else would be presumed, and then if you pass the motion to come back with another work session, all of that would be coming back. So the only thing that you would be acting on today are meter rates and a handful of the penalties.
Okay, thank you. Do we have the capacity just to simply ban RV campers parking within the city limits, or ban quote unquote recreational vehicles of a certain size or weight at any given time?
It's certainly a proposal. It couldn't be done without another public hearing. It's not within the scope of anything that was proposed with this go around. So that's an entirely different, because that would be citywide everywhere.
Unless the thought process in the last 9 seconds is unless, of course, they're on private property. I may need a third round, Mayor. We'll go from there.
Okay, thank you. Alan and then Mike.
Thank you, Mayor. 2 points. One is that, to answer your question, Matt, yes, we could definitely go back and have that conversation about all that stuff. Whether or not we will do it or not is a different question. But yes, we could have that conversation. Right now is not the right time to have that. So if you want to have that conversation, I suggest you support Lindsay's motion. The second point I wanted to make was about the data that Emily was requesting. I sent out some data, Emily, when we had the first work session that was compiled by some local folks on these specific violations that we're talking about today, not on every violation, but what it showed was startlingly clear that the vast majority, 90+% in some cases, depending on which ordinance you're talking about or which violation you're talking about, they didn't get paid. Nothing happened. And to say, well, let's double that fine and more nothing will happen. Let's impound it. More nothing will happen, except now that person's going to be homeless. So focusing in on solutions that we know absolutely do not work, it seems wrong-headed to me. I think supporting what Lindsay's trying to do, which is let's get the fines part passed today, handle that part, the administrative part, and then let's have a better conversation about what are we going to do to make this actually work. it is a small number of people, and there might be other creative ideas like Matt has or ideas that Lindsay has, but let's have that conversation. Let's and put our thinking caps on. You know, if this were easy, we would have already done it. It's not easy. It's very hard, and most places don't have this figured out either. But I think we've had a track record of coming up with creative solutions that end up helping get us towards the solution to the problem. Maybe not completely solve it, but thanks.
Okay, thank you. Mike.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to, with great respect, disagree with my colleague that the idea of the potential of losing or having impounded one's home if they're living in an RV or what have you, whatever vehicle that they're living in the course of camping on the streets, if the prospect of losing that isn't sufficient to find another alternative, then I'm all for looking at other opportunities to find a solution there with you. You bet, all day long. But I disagree. That's not a sufficient incentive for someone to say, hey, I can't do this. I can't park here. It's not a good idea. I could lose my vehicle, so I'm not going to do it. I think that's an important option to have on the table because, again, to the problem, we can't allow people to camp on the streets in vehicles. And to my friend Jennifer's point, I would suggest that there are just as many single women with kids in a small house somewhere where if somebody's sleeping in an RV in front of their house and they don't know who it is, they might find themselves feeling equally unsafe in their own neighborhood. And that's a problem that exists in a lot of parts of our community. And I think we need to be more effective at removing that threat in that situation, not just the behavior. Again, with all respect to my friend Counselor Simple, it's not just the behavior, it's the presence as well of people sleeping in the street in front of somebody's house. It can be a frightening situation, and I don't think it's reasonable. And as someone else mentioned, and I can't remember whom, there isn't anything that homeowner or that renter can do about it. If they're relying on us to say it's not okay for somebody to just pull up and decide to live in front of your house, there's nothing they can do about it, and that's not okay. So I would be willing to have a conversation about where in between these options there's a place we can land. But I think we need to have at least some kind of alternative on the table so that people say this vehicle needs to go away now, and people either respond or it gets taken somewhere else now. Because Randy has listed and proven too many times that the problem exists, and that's the problem we have to solve. Thank you.
Hey, thank you. Randy.
Thank you, Mayor. And Mike, I really appreciate what you just said there as far as, defining the problem. I just want to remind us that behavior problems is a piece of this, but so is the garbage, so is the human waste, and we can't put facilities at every place somebody decides to park a vehicle or pitch a tent. Secondly, it is also the physical parking of these vehicles, large vehicles, in front of people's homes and businesses. It is disruptive. It is a problem to select few. And then finally, I'd like to remind us that we the ones asked staff to go away and come back with some solutions, which I think Jeff has done a very good job of doing, working with his staff. I'm personally against separating these. I think we've talked about this enough. It either needs to be an up or down vote, and then the public will know how we voted. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Jennifer.
Yeah, I just want to really quickly say that I totally agree with Mike that there is a real problem. Like people do feel unsafe. Like I don't think any of us are disagreeing with that. I think we're all on the same page with there's a problem. We don't want garbage in front of our people's houses. We don't want bad behavior in front of people's houses. We don't want people living on our streets. We want them living in secure, safe places. But when there's garbage on the street, the solution is to take care of the garbage, not move the person into a tent, right? Because they don't have a car anymore. So I think we're all there with what the problem is. And this is why I'm supporting Lindsay's motions, is because we just need to have some more conversations where we can really dig in to what other things might we come up with. And maybe we'll go back to some enforcement and that'll be part of the package. But I think we're just not quite there yet. But I want to acknowledge that, like, I understand people are frustrated and you guys are right. Like, some people are not feeling safe but also, like Alan said, I don't want to just do a thing to be like, I did a thing, give me a star. Like, we need to do a thing that's actually going to make a difference. And that takes time, and unfortunately, but.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna, Emily, I see your hand up. I know that Lindsay needs to come back. I want to just do a sort of a process check, and maybe the attorney could also weigh in on this because Lindsay has two possible motions. One would be to act first, it would be you have to put something on you have to put a motion on the table to adopt the ordinance. Then you need a motion to amend, and that would require a motion to divide. But the second option would actually defer the whole conversation to a follow-up work session. That decision to divide, I see you shaking your head, but so I'm just looking for a process clarification from Catherine about the difference between those first two motions, and just reflect on that.
Okay, so you're correct. The first motion is taking the ordinance that you had your public hearing on, putting it on the table to adopt, and then amending it substantially to pull out many of the sections. And so you're just acting today on very discrete sections. The second motion is a motion, the main motion to adopt the ordinance is not put on the table, but in fact, it is a motion to direct the city manager to make all of those same changes of stripping out all of many of the sections and only having an ordinance that addresses the rates and a handful of the penalties, but it will come back to you to discuss before you act. So one is a direction to the city manager. There will be another work session to bring that back and have it. So one doesn't have you taking any action other than to ask for a revised ordinance. That second motion doesn't have you taking any action other than that direction coming back for another. And if the council, I'm sorry to speak to your motion to divide question, if council wants to act separately, whether it's to amend or to modify the ordinance on each of the sections within the ordinance, there would need to be a motion to divide, whether it's a motion to divide the modification direction or a motion to divide the amendment direction. But there doesn't need to be a motion to divide. I know Councilor Semple said that's what she would prefer, and it certainly would be well taken. And that motion with 4 parts, 3 parts could be divided up, but it could also be acted on as well.
Okay, and I see that Lauren also has her hand raised, so maybe you want to jump in.
I just wanted to recognize that there's also a third motion that Councilor Leach sent out that would call for a work session. So assuming that either of the first two motions pass, that third motion would call for a separate work session to talk about recurring parking violations and to talk about the type of program that Councilor Leach described earlier in this meeting.
And we only have 2 minutes, and then some of us have to leave.
That's why I wanted to walk through what was here so that we could make a thoughtful decision about and sort of insight for Lindsay about which motion she might want to put on the table. And I will just sort of, so I'll leave it there, but it might, as a process, it might be that the second motion gives us a little more elbow room to actually come back, but I will leave that to you. And so Matt and Emily, do you need to speak at this point, or can we put the motion on the table for you?
Mayor, I was going to put the first motion.
You're not in the queue, so just hold on.
Well, I'm answering the question, Mayor. I was going to put forth a motion. That's why my hand was raised.
Okay, so Emily, okay. So Emily, do you need to speak now? Okay.
Yes, please. I just want to ask, we could approve all of this today and come back for another work session for more strategies that might help some more, in which case I'm willing to go forward with it today and realize that there's more work to be done on this situation, but I'm willing to see if the increased fines with Judge Gill's brilliant interpretation of what's appropriate at the moment works.
Okay. So Matt, are you proposing?
And I don't know how to, put that, and I don't know if it needs to be part of a motion. It's just, yes, we could come back.
We could. So I'm looking for clarity. I thought Lindsay was going to put these motions forward, and so I'm just not sure what's happening here.
Mayor, I was going to move forward with the first motion, and if a counselor wants to amend, they're certainly welcome.
Okay. All right. Go for it then.
Move to adopt an ordinance amending sections 5.225, 5.265, 5.335, 5.990, and 5.995 of the Eugene Code 1971 as set forth in attachment A to this AIS.
Second.
Okay. Lindsay.
I would like to move to amend the proposed ordinance to delete section 1 in its entirety, 2, delete section 2 in its entirety, and 3, delete subsection 6 of Eugene Code 5.990 from section 4.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion on this? Okay, so all in favor of the motion to amend, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3. Opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that fails. So we're back to the original motion. Any discussion on that? All in favor, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Opposed? 1, 2, 3. Okay, so that passes. And so do you want to put another motion on the table about coming back with other ideas?
We could. Okay. So
Counselor Leach, that third motion that was provided to you would likely address.
Okay. I move to direct the city manager to schedule a work session on further discussion of vehicular camping and to a proposal for a program that provides resources in addition to or in lieu of parking citations to individuals living in their vehicles, including but not limited to vehicle repair.
Second.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I think it looks like unanimous. Anyone opposed? Okay, that passes. Thank you very much. And just a couple minutes overdue. So thank you all for that really, really important conversation and hard conversation. And thank you, staff, for all the information you provided. And with that, we are adjourned.